Hey there, nerds. Jimmy here with this guy. Anywho, so as you guys know, I am fond of experimenting with my son. And several years ago, we were given the green light by Uber Nerd, my wife, Allison, to finally watch Friday the 13th. And I can't really put my finger on it, but it's one of my favorite horror franchises. I know it's not great film the whole way through, but for some reason, I love this franchise.
I have to agree. It's definitely not great. The best way I can characterize the series is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that's just woo all over the place. But at its worst, you can still make a fun roast out of it.
I agree with that, except that I literally will try and watch 7, 8, and to me, the worst one in the whole franchise, 9. And like I start it with good intentions, and I can't.
I gotta be honest, when we got to like 7, 8, 9, I couldn't help myself. I was just making fun of everything. I remember the scene. It's Jason. I think they're under the house. They're like in the cellar. And it's like the woman's corpse, and she gives birth to the next Jason, and it's like, who wrote this?
Yeah.
Who came up with it? Someone had to sit there and write this on a piece of paper and then type it out and then get it passed by the other writers. And then the other writers agreed that this had to go to the executive, the director, and the producer. And they gave it the green light. What?
Jason Goes to Hell is an awful movie. It just makes no sense.
It's
really makes no sense.
Its only redeeming factor is that it sets up Freddy versus Jason.
That is true. And for those not in the know, number 7, A New Blood, where really this is the reason why I hate Zombie Jason. Like, it just goes downhill quick. Like, 6 is one of the best movies in the franchise. And then for some reason, Kane Hodder, who is known as Jason, as soon as he took over, and he's a phenomenal Jason, but as soon as he took over, like, the movies went, and I don't know why. But that was originally supposed to be the Freddy versus Jason movie, but people couldn't agree. New Line Cinema, Paramount, whatever. I don't know the details. They just couldn't agree. Couldn't get the script made. So we ended up with a telekinetic who brings Jason back from the bottom of the Crystal Lake, and electricity was involved. And it's, literally my description is dumb because the movie's dumb.
Because we really needed to make Jason the modern Prometheus. I don't know. It was bad writing. Let's just be honest.
But one of my favorite things about the franchise is it's like this happy accident.
It is.
Like the first one, Jason isn't a factor.
No.
Even though Friday the 13th and Jason are synonymous, Jason's not in it. So now this movie became basically a twist. And then we have 2 where we kind of give an ode to the town that dreaded sundown, where he's wearing just a potato sack over his head. And I really like that one. It's iconic. And we see Jason for the first time. We literally get the story of this boy who didn't drown and kind of grew up in the woods by himself and became an animal, basically.
It's a great sequel, too, because it doesn't just mindlessly copy what came before. It, in a way, like Halloween 2, was it 80? Was the Halloween 2 1980s?
I think it was 82 or 84. I can't remember.
It's like the 1980s Halloween 2. It takes what was set up before and it expands upon it. Yes, it's the same formula of teenagers get massacred at a camp, but it adds to the story in a very, very fun way, because it's like, at first we just thought Jason was dead, and the one time he shows up in the first movie, it's like maybe a dream, and he's a weird, gross swamp thing kid, but now it's like, oh no, he lived, and he is now doing things, and he's got a creepy shrine for his mom, and all sorts of messed up stuff.
And it was a great connection, because at the very beginning, he takes vengeance for his mom on Adrienne King, the only survivor, well, the female survivor from the first one, which was great continuity. I love how they're around the camp, and the director of the camp is giving everybody the insight of Jason and what it was, and then he's, scary story, but then it becomes real, and like, oh my goodness. But from there, we go to 3, where we finally, in a weird way, I say finally, it's only the 3rd movie, but we get the mask, and now we get iconic Jason.
Yes.
And again, a happy accident. They didn't want to use the burlap sack again, so what do? Oh, you know what? I got this mask because I'm a huge, I think it was a Chicago Blackhawks fan, the costume designer. Put it on. And now we have Jason by accident. And oh, by the way, it was shot in 3D. And it's so
Yeah.
silly. Some of the things, like I remember there's like a little thing coming out, and a rat comes out.
Oh
It's
my
like,
God, yeah.
and the shooting the spear in the eye, and they come
Yeah.
right at. It's like, or when the dude's juggling the balls over his girlfriend.
Oh
and
God,
like
that
it's so
that guy.
silly. But someday I want to watch the unedited version because there is a like super gory, dirty version out there, but it got cut because they originally got an X rating because it was too gory, too violent, and they cut it down to what it is today. But you can see stills and stuff online
Yeah.
of what it originally was. Like, ooh, I want to see what that is.
And now with 4 to 6, we get the Tommy Jarvis storyline, which I thought was really cool. I also kind of forgot what happens. If I'm not mistaken, Tommy Jarvis was the younger brother of one of the girls who was killed in the other movies?
So let's start over with that.
That's a good idea.
Tommy Jarvis is just a kid who lives in the woods with his mom and sister because his parents got divorced. It's played by Corey Feldman, which is fantastic. He was in Goonies, Stand By Me, all that fun stuff. But in that, we have a brother who is in search of his sister who was in an earlier movie. He's the one that's in the woods in the tent, and he befriends that family, and he's trying to find what happened to his sister, which is cool because it's basically the impetus what happened to the remake in 2009 with the brother trying to find out what happened to his sister. But that time, the sister's actually alive, and he's in search of her. So that was a really cool storyline. But I agree with you. The Tommy Jarvis trilogy is fantastic, starting with Corey Feldman. He comes back briefly in the beginning of 5. Yes, 5 is not terribly popular. A lot of people don't like it just because it isn't Jason Voorhees. It's Roy. And
Which is funny considering the first film wasn't Jason either.
that's a good point. So they try and fool you the whole time. But at the time, 4 was the final chapter. It was Tom Savini coming back, killing the creation that he made in 1, and it was supposed to be the end.
And then we got 5 and 6.
Unfortunately, it made a lot of money, so you knew they weren't going to end. So we had
Yeah.
5. I enjoyed 5. I thought 5 was great. And 5 was supposed to carry on to 6 with the same actors and such. They were signed on to the next one and continue Tommy Jarvis. And they show it at the end. Tommy looked like he was going to become the Jason figure and start killing and rampaging. Obviously, PTSD was a huge factor in that. But that movie didn't make as much money. So they went a huge rewrite, and we get our first Zombie Jason.
Now, before we move to Zombie Jason, what I love about 5 and 6 is that they, in the first 3 films and 4 a little bit, you get like the old crazy dude, like, don't go to the camp. Ugh.
Crazy Ralph.
Now you have a kid who has seen Jason several times over, pleading with people that it's like, no, I have seen this. I have witnessed it. You have to listen to me. And it's this very powerful thing where it's like, why would anybody listen to you try and plead that? And it's so interesting to watch now that it's not just some old weirdo who says it. It's somebody who's witnessed it firsthand, and we know has witnessed it firsthand, grow up with this awful trauma and try to save as many people as he can by trying to stop Jason, essentially.
And it's sort of the first inkling of what happens in Freddy versus Jason, where the town is like, we changed the name, we made sure, we pretend this didn't happen, so nobody knows this happened. So when Tommy comes in, they're like, no, shut up, dude. We don't want to have anything to do with that. So he kills Jason. He sends him back to where he originally supposedly died at the bottom of Crystal Lake, and that's where we get the moronic telekinetic person who brings him back to life.
Zap, 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 zap,
Yeah.
zap.
So-
Oh, yay.
Then we suffer through a movie that's called Jason Takes Manhattan, but he's in Manhattan for like 15 minutes, and somehow at the end, toxic sludge goes through the sewers of New York, which was news to me, and we have like baby Jason in the sewers again. I don't know. And then somehow we get to Jason Goes to Hell again. What?
It's-
And I think it was at that point where
You could tell. the
Paramount
writing,
sold
yeah.
the rights. So, because if I remember correctly, because I was old enough now to see these in theaters, if I remember correctly, there's a big gap between those two. And Jason Goes to Hell was now a New Line Cinema, which was going to set up the Freddy versus Jason. And the fun fact is, I think it was that one where Kane Hodder is still Jason, but he also plays a security guard that sees Jason leave a building
Yeah.
or something like that. So it's kind of a little fun fact. But then we get to one that is kind of hated, but I think
love
it's fun because it's so goofy.
We love it. Jason X. Jason goes to space. So if I'm not mistaken, it's just a random run-in with Jason, but all of a sudden the American government, specifically the FBI, has been like tracking him down, trying to stop him, and they freeze him.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They wanted to experiment on him, the
I
military,
forgot that part.
because he couldn't die and he was
Right.
indestructible.
Right, he kept
So,
coming back. And then
Of course, the military screwed up, and the one scientist ran and tried to lock him in a cryogenic freezer, and he comes out with a machete, and then the whole room gets frozen.
And so then, like, what is it, like thousands of years later, or just
Can't
a
remember the
thousand
exact-
years
yeah, it's a
later?
couple thousand years, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Earth is this wasteland, and a bunch of space ravagers go to Earth and find the frozen chamber, open it,
Well, it's like a class trip because they're like students.
and take Jason back to experiment on him. And it just becomes, Jason becomes this like mechanized warlord. And what I love is that they weren't even trying to be serious. They knew it was stupid and they just ran with it. Like, one of the best deaths in it is where there's the girls in the simulation on the camp, and he just picks them up in a sleeping bag and bangs them against the tree. It's so dumb, but it's so funny.
To that end, it does have a couple good deaths. I don't remember her name, but she was the one originally experimenting on Jason as he was brought on board, and he was theoretically dead.
That one was
And
good.
she's got her back to him, and he comes up and shoves her face into like liquid nitrogen, and like just
and
she immediately freezes, and then he crushes her head.
Yeah.
And, like,
it's
all yeah.
That was a really genius way to play on. Like,
And they really did at the
sci-fi.
end set up a new way to take that Jason on, as we came in and you see the shooting star and the two kids on the side of the lake, and like, let's go investigate. And they had already said that's Earth 2. Obviously, that concept never went anywhere because the next movie we got was Freddy versus Jason.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun little movie. I thought it was genius the way they found a compromise so that nobody really wins. And it was fun to see how both of them played on each other's weaknesses and understandings. Like, Jason is a juggernaut. You try and stop him, he will walk through you and make sure you don't come back from that. Freddy is cunning. He is, how do I put this other than an asshole? So he uses, like, Jason's fear of water against him, and then Jason's like, no, and it's this beautiful, as much as it is a horror film, it's a beautiful way of like taking these two characters and examining how they would fight each other, knowing how they're written.
And I know we're talking about Friday the 13th, but this was the last time Robert Englund played Freddy, and he played Freddy as only he can play Freddy, and it was superb. No, it's not the greatest movie ever made, but it's the only Freddy versus Jason movie we have, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it. It's got some really good actors in it.
It does.
I really enjoy what they were able to pull off, especially since we've been waiting all the way since First Blood to see this movie.
And what's fun is that it's a lot of the fight scenes are well choreographed and thought out. Like, a lot of it is Freddy just trying anything to perturb Jason, and Jason just constantly getting up, and it works because it's like, if that were the confrontation, that's what would happen.
We also get to see Jason Ritter in a horror movie that involves Jason Voorhees, which, fun fact, you might not know, his dad, John Ritter, was in a Chucky movie, which is just hilarious to me because he was such an awesome, awesome actor, fun man. Anyway, that takes us to the remake, which I think got a lot of hate. I thoroughly enjoyed that movie.
I have to agree. It's a great Friday the 13th. It's got, excuse me, I cannot remember his name, the dude from Superstore in like the first scene.
I forgot about that, yes.
I was like, oh, hey, it's that guy. I love him.
And another great death in the setup of the campground where the girl is in the sleeping bag above the fire, and it's like, oh my God, this is horrific.
They really went back to like the first two trilogies, with more so the first trilogy with like the really gruesome deaths, and that it's like, it's not just Jason killing to kill, yay, it's Jason killing out of vengeance. And it's really cool to see a comeback to that with like a different perspective. Because originally we had it with in the 80s. Sorry, it's the timeline's super fuzzy because I confuse some of the series.
Everything pre 2005 is old. Yeah.
The 80s, the first movie, it's like his mom does it out of a vendetta. It's like a love of her kid and this anger and this love of her child and this grief. He does it out of grief and anger and vengeance. And it's interesting to see us with that perspective now come back to a different perspective, but with Jason. So like a reboot where Miss Voorhees really isn't in the picture.
And it's nice because they tell essentially the story of 1, 2, 3, 4 all in one movie, take the best parts of that and make it this reboot, which again, I thought it was fantastic. I'm not usually a guy who likes to give kudos to Michael Bay, but it was his production company that made that, and they did a fantastic job making that movie. I really enjoyed it. So now we're up to Friday the 13th, part 13, which we don't have yet. We've waited a long time. Can't wait. 13. I've always had it in my mind this was going to be an amazing movie, so hopefully we'll see something soon.
I'm just saying, if it doesn't take place on Friday the 13th, immediate 0. It's got to take place on Friday the 13th. I mean, come on.
And none of this, the last rumor was they were going to do a found footage sort of thing. It's like, no, that's played out. No.
That doesn't
do
work
that.
with Jason.
Let's come up with something better.
Make Jason X again. I'm kidding. Don't do that.